Today I wanted to talk to you about a little something that maybe you've been feeling yourself. I've been working for over 20 years now, full time, helping people access better health and vitality, whether it's emotionally, mentally, physically, or spiritually. And I really feel like this one thing is what we're often missing, especially in the modern Western view of creation, that could better our lives, that could lead to more vitality, way less disease, pain, and suffering. And it's so obvious, yet that's what's funny about kind of being in a cult, right? Like, we're in a culture. We live in a cult. We live in a culture. And we can't see clearly when we're in cults. One of the main things that I feel separates the Eastern view and the ancient view from the modern one, which is quite wounded, It's quite segregated. It's separated. It's the wound that we need a salve for. And the original wound is actually, that's a big topic, but let's just say in relation to what I'm talking about, the original wound is actually in the mind. And it's the way we're perceiving ourselves. It's the way that we're perceiving ourselves in relation to these trees, these crickets, these birds, these plants, this soil, this water. The way that we perceive man and nature as two, man and nature. The way that we perceive a spirit and matter as two, There is no real two. And that's why I feel like a lot of the Eastern arts are really a lot about threes. The Celts were really a lot about threes too. To transcend, to find the middle that transcends the duality, which also makes a W, which I love, which is, for me, references the importance of staying wild, staying connected as human beings to the planet that is our mother. We are all earthlings at the end of the day, just like ducklings, we're earthlings. And what that means is that we can't have life without our mother. We also need a father, okay? Mother is matter. Matter is the ancient Greek word for mother. Pater, like paternal, is father. And we need both. We need both. We need the sun, we need spirit, we need the earth, we need the mother, we need creation, we need the soil. However, the Eastern view, which I think is very similar to shamanistic thinking, animistic thinking throughout history, which, if you don't know what that means, it's that everything here is oozing with sentience and consciousness, and depending on your cosmology, with God. Everything here is radiant with God. And that's really different than the materialistic cult that we live in the West today, which is consciousness is only the result of biology. We have biology which leads to awareness. And that's a massive difference from consciousness coming into creation, and birthing creation from consciousness, like a dream. Like the sun goes through a crystal and puts a prism on the wall, or puts a rainbow on the wall. For us, that's the holistic view, that everything returns to source and everything comes from source. But the material view, which can tie into some Western religions as well, is that we're actually separated from source. And Consciousness is really just the result of biology, and biology is basically a machine. There's no sentience, there's nothing divine here. It's just genetics, and it's really just random. The best mutation, which of course apparently happened without any intelligence, it's just randomly happened. The best mutation won, which is pretty funny. If you see creatures that can change their color to blend in with tree bark, or like just the immense intelligence in creation, that we actually perceive that as random accidents that kind of won out in evolution. It's really quite ignorant, isn't it? It's quite, honestly, childish and hilarious. Because here's the thing I've noticed talking to scientists, and I'm going to get to why this can improve your quality of life today, but if you talk to a scientist, and I've talked to many, I've taught in medical institutions and of scientists as family members and so on, they do not like you talking about intelligent design as a butterfly goes by. They don't like us talking about intelligent design because it's sort of hinting at God. And then that means there's something we can't control, and there's something we don't understand. And they feel like, for some people, they don't want to get into the whole good book and the old ways and all that thing. But let's say, even without that, they don't want to be humbled by the idea that there's consciousness that is uber intelligent, flowing through all things, and it's just a little much. It fries the circuits of the sort of mechanistic mind of the Western scientist, except for certain people like Einstein seem to be able to keep room for the idea of God or some divine source. So first of all, there's understanding that everything in creation is oozing with consciousness, but more to the point that there's this idea that the body's a machine, that we're actually like parts. Like, I've got a heart, I've got lungs, I've got kneecaps, I've got feet, I've got teeth and eyeballs, and all of them have mechanistic workings. All true, of course. But the body is not just a machine. Like, I'm sitting here beside a garden that this is a garden. All back there is all herbal gardens. Okay, everywhere around here is gardens, and everything is feeding off of that light up there. Everything's feeding off of that light, that life force. The body is not separate in any way. Like, we're literally made out of earth, bacteria, minerals, right? We're made of, we have up to 5 pounds of bacteria in us. Okay, that's a lot. Imagine lifting 5 pounds, right? But we also know we're 70% water. We also know that we're breathing this breath that these trees are exhaling. I'm inhaling, and I'm exhaling, and they're inhaling, and it's this incredible dance of life, right? This is, it goes a step further if you really think about it. It's also that we're connected to that fire, to that light, to that spirit, to that will to live, to metabolize, to transform, to work with our situation. That's the will, that's the fire element in each of us. And, that's the inner alchemist. That's the one that, there's a sort of analogy that the lotus is growing out of duck shit, basically. The pond at the bottom of the stinky, dark, fecund pond. And that the lotus somehow is able to alchemize and transmute that and turn it into a lotus, into this radiant beauty. All of us are being asked to do that. And to understand how nature does this, how does nature take the soil and turn it into life? See, unlike plants, we are made up of the same stuff, but our soil is in our gut biome, okay? Our soil is in our gut biome. And if we don't have good soil, everything's downstream from there. Everything. So if you're a farmer and you want to grow a good crop, you have to tend your soil. So how each of us tends our soil each day really, really, really matters. How do we tend our soil? I mean, for you, you might immediately think, I take probiotics, Yes, we need probiotics. Yes, we need, the right digestive enzymes and saliva. And these are the pillars of this soil being in a good way. Because if this garden here gets moldy and this garden gets too low or not enough light or not enough air, it starts to mold. And then nature takes it back. It basically decays. Okay? So for us, we have to understand what the ancients understood, which is that life is like a balance of elements, right? We have to balance the elements out, the water, the earth, the fire, and the air. Okay? Stick with me. We are made of these things. These are not romantic concepts. We're made of it. The world is made of these elements. And what that means is that if your garden doesn't have enough of each of those, or too much of one of those, like what if it gets too much water? What if it gets not enough water? What if this garden has too much heat? Not enough moistness and coolness. The way herbalists look at, people is in this way. Everybody's a balance between moist and dry, between hot and cold. Everyone is a walking balance of the elements. And our job is to garden the people. Just like there's some people who garden plants, and many herbalists also garden plants. But we're gardening people. And that means we have to tend to the soil. And that means that we have to look at these main pillars that keep the soil healthy. At the center of every ceremony, virtually every sacred ceremony, there is, intention, but there's fire. You stoke the fire. In India, they call it Agni. But whether it's candles, whether it's the hearth in the home, if you don't have the hearth in the home, and you don't tend that fire, like we go to indigenous ceremonies locally, and the fire is lit before the ceremony, it's tended through for days, till the ceremony's done. We have to tend the fire. It is the alchemist. It is the great transformer. Fire is our protection. Now, we're just gonna, of course, we're still keeping in mind that there's balance. But we need fire, and fire is one of those things that we don't pay enough attention to when it comes to our health and well-being. How do we digest? It's like a compost pile. It's like a compost pile. If you stir a compost pile, you'll notice it's very steamy. It's very hot, right? Enzymes, bacteria, just like the stomach, right? For us, that's saliva and good flora. For us, it also includes stomach acid. If you have a good fire in your hearth, in your home, at the heart, right? The hearth of the home, then the house is protected. If you don't have a fire, then slowly everything gets cool, then everything starts to get damp, then everything starts to mold, then everything starts to decay. And if you could hear, see frequency, everything's going whoa, and nature's trying to take back to the earth what starts to get too low in density, right? Imagine a tree in the forest and the light and the breeze versus one that's kind of half fallen over near the dampness, near the earth. It's going to start to decay and go back, yeah? So now you're probably thinking, how do I tend my fire? Because if you don't have a good fire, not only is everything going to mold, but for us, that's throughout this house. This ecosystem starts to get dank, damp, and the wrong kind of inhabitants and flora and frequency. And that affects everything from leaky gut, all these modern situations, candida, situations that make you susceptible to being a great host for viruses and parasites and Lyme disease and all these different overgrowths. Very similar to, like, if a stream is flowing, not much is growing in it, right? But if it gets stagnant, suddenly it's blooming. All these different, life forms that came from where? They came because the frequency was perfect. If any of you know Louis Pasteur, he talked about, most of his life, this is from like high school biology, but most of his life, he said that, it's not the bug, it's the terrain. No, sorry, it's not the terrain, it's the bug, was his argument. There's no such thing as a problem bug. It's no such thing as a bad terrain. It's the germ. And apparently near the end of his life, he said he was wrong, that the terrain is what allows the bug to thrive. This is terrain. This is ecosystem. Okay? If you've ever seen pictures of, rivers from way up high, and they make the same, patterns as you see in bronchioles. There's many patterns in nature that you can see in the pattern of the human body. Because we're like a fractal of the earth. That's why we have the same ratio of water, right, as the planet. We're a fractal of the earth. And if we don't understand how to garden this body, then we're just going to be managing diseases, which is good for business, Certainly pharmaceuticals will come along to it. Let's say a garden that's not getting enough sun and air and it's too wet. And then they're like, oh yeah, the problem is you need some sort of spray, some sort of chemical spray to kill that problem. Or we're just gonna cut out this plant and this plant. It doesn't change the actual issue. And I think people are starting to get this. People are starting to understand this. The gut biome is the foundation of not just our physical health and these emerging topics like inflammation, autoimmunity, right? Because we've got systemic bad flora, systemic bacterial, viral, yeast, parasitic infections can happen if this fire is not tended. Because I'll tell you, fire is the great protector of the home. If you keep the fire where it should be, which is in the belly, and you're digesting your food properly, and you're not putting on a bunch of soggy, wet wood. I'm talking ice cream and smoothies and all these kind of breads and peanut butter and jam and all the wet, like the sugary in Eastern medicine is dampness, right? Yeast and cold ice water, carbonated beverages, all that kind of stuff. That's putting out the fire. All that's putting out the fire. And what happens when you do that is your fire smolders. And that's bloating and gas, and that's like, that's feeling icky and achy and feeding the wrong bacteria and yeast through your body. And then before you know it, your mind is foggy and you're inflamed in your brain, and you end up feeling depression, irritability. And so there's now more research coming out that diet is at foundational when it comes to treating serious mental health issues. So we've heard that the gut is like the second brain, but let's consider that everything's downstream from the gut flora. So if it's producing waste, then you're actually ending up inflaming your brain and you're feeling depression. So what can you do about this today? What can all of us do about this today? And this is what I work with my clients. And this analogy I hope is working for you. You have to tend your compost pile. And the way that you do that is what our ancestors already knew. You have to use the medicines that we call the spice cabinet. All of those herbs, all of those plants, even people who don't think of themselves as herbalist types, they still use the spices because the spices are at the heart of the kitchen. All of these are considered to have all different health properties that keep away the bad guy bacterias, molds, yeasts, parasites, even cancer, which there's more and more research is connected to parasites. Big topic. But look at oregano, look at turmeric, look at ginger, okay? Look at garlic, okay? Look at cinnamon, look at thyme, look at sage. These are all rosemary. Like all of these plants, if you'll notice in nature, nothing feasts on them. When we take these plants into our stomach, into our compost pile, they bring the warmth. They protect us from the wrong kind of party going on in there. And that is why at the center of our home is often salt and pepper. Pepper for the warmth, salt because it's sodium hydrochloride, right? That is the foundation of hydrochloric stomach acid. Now, most of us walking around today have low stomach acid. And that's the result of bad diet, too much of those damp, sweet, crappy foods I was telling you about, but also a lack of good spice, and stress lowers stomach acid. Stress lowers the stomach acid. So when we're told to relax and chew our food, it's not just to blend it with the saliva enzymes, which is important, often called the fountain of youth, by the way. But it's more than that. It's also that we're increasing our stomach acid when we're relaxed and eating, okay? The other way that you would get a fire going, besides putting fiery, warm spices that work against all the bad bacteria and so on, protecting the entire body and keeping the warmth where it should be, the fire in the belly. Because if you don't have fire here, the right amount, you'll get fire in your joints, you get inflamed brains, you get inflamed prostates, you get inflamed all kinds of things. This is so foundational. This is so simple, but we have to tend the fire. If the stomach stays acidic, the tissues remain alkaline. If the stomach goes too alkaline and swampy, we get a lot of waste, and it makes the tissue acidic. And that's the foundation of most disease. This I'm just going to plant a seed here. If you think that you have too much stomach acid because you have heartburn, please look into it. The symptoms of low stomach acid are often heartburn, poor digestion, and heartburn. And so when you go on those, certain medications to lower your stomach acid even more, the symptom might go away, but the problem is still there. In fact, it's worse. But this brings up the other thing that I'll ask you. If you're camping or you're in the house and you're trying to get your wood stove going in your cabin, what do you do to get it going when it's not quite going? First of all, don't put wet wood on it. Don't put too much wood on whatever fire's there. Don't put too much food on your stomach. Its ability to break it down decreases and you smolder and you get toxins, okay? You blow on it. You blow on it and you add air. Okay, and you're thinking, how do you add air? Well, in herbalism, just like the spices are considered warming, pungent, and belonging to fire element, air element is the bitter herbs. The bitter herbs are used to stimulate the digestive juices, but also to get rid of the bad bacteria and parasites. A lot of the bitter herbs are the ones that are killing off the bad, inhabitants of the GI tract in the body. So I met a woman in my herbal apothecary the other day, and she's from the Ukraine. And her grandmother lived to be like 105 or so. And she said before she passed, she got to ask her, "Grandma, what's the secret?" And her grandmother said, "Take your bitter herbs. It's the bitter herbs." So you'll see around the world, Chinese bitters, Canadian bitters, Swedish bitters. Locally here we have herbs like calamus root or wike that is used a lot by indigenous folks. Where do you get your bitters each day? Those bitters blow on that fire. They get the stomach acid going, and they also kill off the damp, funky bacterias and candidas and so on. Very, very important. And you might say, I don't like bitter. Well, there's a saying that what tastes bitter at first turns out sweet. And what tastes sweet at first turns out bitter. So we can choose the kind of bitter that we're going to have in life. I would rather choose to taste some bitters before I eat, which you will grow to like, by the way, than I would, have very bitter experiences down the road because of my addiction to sweetness. Okay? Also, when you take bitters, you're killing off a lot of the bad microbes, so to speak, that are creating a lot of your cravings for sweets. And so you actually develop a bit of a palate for bitter. It's very awakening, it's very enlivening. People, and they do say, I had an elder say this to me once, if you really don't like the flavor of something, then you really need it. Okay, so people who have a lot of sweet, they don't like the flavor of bitter when they first have it, but then they start to crave it. So it blows on the fire, it blows on the metabolism, it gets the overall metabolism of the body going. And what do you think that does to your frequency? You've just added fire and air to a damp, dank situation, which is decay, degeneration, inflammation. This is the foundation of so much. Now, to that air element concept, you can do deep breathing and, pranayama or whatever your language is for aerating your system, just like you would a fish pond, If you don't have oxygen, your tissue's not going to alkalize very well. And if your tissue's toxic and not alkalize, it starts to steal calcium from the bones just to keep the pH of the blood in good shape. There's other things that stand in for your stomach acid historically for the fire element, and that's things like lemon water, apple cider vinegar in water. These are all folk approaches that it's really about gardening the ecosystem of the body. You can't even claim that this is natural medicine. I mean, it is. Can be looked at through that lens. But it's actually us understanding the elemental nature of the body. How to garden each day. If you lived in a house where your only heat was a wood stove, you'd get up and stoke that fire, let me tell you. But do you get up and stoke this fire? Because if you do, you're going to burn clean. You're going to digest your nutrients. You're going to have strong blood. You're going to feel vital. You won't feel achy and cranky and foggy. You won't be like the perfect sort of ground for infectious, opportunistic infections, you know, the terrain and the bug thing. This is so huge. You won't need to spray the garden. You won't need to cut things out, you know, because if you do these things, getting out in the light for 20 minutes a day, getting oxygenated, getting your energy and your body heat up. Don't put too much damp wood on the fire. Don't put ice water and carbonated beverages on this compost pile that works through a process of heat. These are simple things that we can integrate into our lives. And day after day, just like a garden, you start to see it thriving. Okay, then we can start to talk about what is the optimum nutrition that we put on. What is the, the superfoods, longevity herbs, mushrooms, all these things that feed this ecosystem. I hope this is helpful for you. If you know somebody you care about, share this with them. Simple things. People can afford spices. They can afford peppermint tea to bring the stomach acid up. They can afford cayenne. They can afford nettle. You can go picking it. There are herbs that are all around us, that were gifted to us by whatever you want to call that divine love, that presence, that we just have to rebuild our relationship. We have to remember, put back together the split member, and a lot of it's in here. Simple things. I hope that helps. If you have any comments, please leave them. What do you do to keep your stomach healthy? Let's say people who travel. These are a good time to have good stomach health. Some people travel, no problem, right? Some people travel, they're catching every problem in the food. It's because the gut is not balanced. If you want to learn more, I also have the Wild Medicine Collective you can check out. I've got a little link tree and some online courses. I also do consultations. Or reach out to your local herbalist. Get a good book on Ayurvedic medicine. This would be called Agni, this fire element in Ayurvedic medicine. Thousands of years old, this Ayurvedic medicine. So that's it for now. Much love, keep the faith. Hope you have a beautiful day. Let's cherish each day and be grateful for what we have. Bye for now.